So, first, welcome everybody. I'm Jonathan Bryce Dutra. You can call me John if you find my name difficult to pronounce. And I want to start just everybody who I believe everybody here knows what World Heritage is, so I'm not going to explain this. I'm just going direct to the point. So, what important to say here is why I chose Germany and why Germany is a very good example about this kind of study. If you see the map of World Heritage sites in the planet, by created since from 1972, Germany currently is the top 5 in terms of both natural and cultural mixed sites. But if you consider just the cultural sites, Germany is the top 2 in the world. So it does not mean that the German World Heritage are more important than the others, but means that the country is committed for this kind of standards and they really apply every year for new locations. So it's a very important in the German culture. But dividing just in natural and cultural in terms of creating a net for might not be enough. It could be very broad. So I like also to address for the German, the GNTB, the German National Tourist Board, who also promotes the cultural heritage sites in Germany. And they have a more finer divisions, especially for the cultural sites. So you can see here, they divide into churches, castles, industrial heritage, historical town centers, and other World Heritage sites. So this is important because I say I'm talking about creating an app for a tourist World Heritage site attraction, and it's a church. Probably you have a different set of guidelines because at church you talk about having indoor navigation, so it'll be a different settings. So then what you have in Weimar is actually spread locations along the city. So you have is the only a few cities in Germany who has more than one World Heritage. One is the Bauhaus, and the other one is the classical Weimar, and then this you talk about 13 locations. Sometimes the location have more than one building. So the profile for this target in developing an app is about having more than one building or monument spread in the city. They need to move through the city, and then getting cultural information regarding each location or monument, and access further information that could be opening hours or tours or anything that's related to this, and of course being a tourist attraction. So, but curiously enough, when you see this GNTB, when they place both the Weimar World Heritage sites, they put in the other World Heritage sites. But if you think about the profile that, you talk about walking through the city, these guidelines you propose in here in this study could perfectly also be applied for historical town centers. So both, if you see the numbers of heritage sites placed on World Heritage sites and historical town centers, you'll be around 41% of the total World Heritage sites officially from UNESCO for Germany. But let's talk about the methodology that I use here. So basically, what I did was collecting guidelines and recommendations from 2 different scenarios. One based on what the industry, what the market is doing in terms of apps productions for cultural heritage sites in Germany, and then also to see what the academic literature review says. So, and then building 2 prototypes based on those 2 different guidelines, test them, and then analyzing the results and proposing what could be the best match for this kind of profile. Talk a little bit more about how I did the industry market analysis. I in both cases apply this expert-based evaluation where I play the role of expert in terms of usability, in terms of how it works, in terms of interface design, and then I collect qualitative and quantitative data about features, about formats they apply it, and then I categorize in a predefined set of categories and subcategories such as content, design, media, etc. And then I have this set of mobile guidelines based on the industry. And in this case was just select the ones that was more than 50% of the selected material. And for selecting the apps, I start to using keywords such as UNESCO World Heritage Sites in Germany, of course should be official app market or iOS or Android, and then I use UNESCO Germany, UNESCO Deutschland, Welterbe, that's World Heritage in German, World Heritage, and then also use the name of the World Heritage sites in German and in English, for instance, Hanseatic city of Lübeck and Hansestadt Lübeck to be sure that you're covering everything. And when the World Heritage Site was an old town, I also used the name of the city and UNESCO, let's say Wismar and UNESCO. And of course, should be a dedicated World Heritage Sites, not generic touristic ones. That was the categories that I use here. And then in the end, I select 29 apps. Some of them was excluded. Some of apps were just clickbaits when you just have a pretend to be an app and then you click there and then you have to pay to access more. Or sometimes they are made by students, was based on HTML5, so problems with loading information. So when you have this kind of problems, they was excluded, and in the end, we had 29 apps to analyze. And think about the systematic literature review. I use a different approach in this case. It was about getting qualitative and quantitative data from articles, academic articles, and then analyze them in order to fuel also what could be the recommendations. And here I use the main journals such as ACM, IE, JSTOR, SAGE, and Google Scholars. And what I did in this case was, oops, no, Mac, don't do it. My Mac's thinking now. Sure. Why it's not changing? Okay. Sorry, my computer.
What is going on?
My computer did a froze, but now it's working, right? You seen that?
No, I don't see a mouse.
No, not the mouse. The screen is showing.
Methodology.
Yeah.
Systematic.
Yes.
Yeah.
So to find studies, so I use search strings such as mobile usability plus guidelines plus app plus heritage plus travel guide plus city guide, app guidelines, mobile interfaces. And then I put the setting for the last 5 years. And then I collect the first 50 results on each platform according to the algorithms that say, okay, that's the relevance order. And then I collect these 50 guidelines, 50 first results from each platform that I mentioned before. And then by the abstract, I see if I could use or not. Just to talk a little bit more, for instance, I use mobile studies on mobile websites were included as long as the address for interface design mobile screens. Medical and health studies also were included if the address for the mobile interface design and usability, but not so much on the therapeutic issues. And then also context-aware, location-based mobile interactions, and also including in studies on interface mobile for elderly users, as you might be aware that in Weimar, you have a very strong with the elderly groups as a tourist target, and also selecting studies about youth as well, because we have also a lot of studies from the schools in Weimar I could see when I was living there. And I'll also try to not get so much vague guidelines such as, the guideline is creating appealing design. So that's kind of too open for interpretation. So this kind of guidelines was not selected. And in the end, I selected 249 academic publications. Some of them I could not access because I have to pay subscriptions or accessibility issues. A lot of them I found the authors on ResearchGate, for instance, who wrote to them and they send me the papers. So in the end, from this number, just 13 I could not access. And then in the end, I end up with 236 publications to analyze, which I think is a pretty good number. And here you can see in the screen now the word cloud from the abstract, from the keywords from these publications. So you can see that's very strong on app, usability, mobile context, mobile tourism, cultural heritage in general. And then in the end, after having these two set of guidelines, I build two prototypes. And here I try to make both as much using similar content in terms of text or imagery, but just doing some subtle changes. So here was not the intention to make, wow, I'm gonna do one prototype uglier, another one beautiful, and then it'll be easier to choose one. But I try to make a appeal design in both and just doing these subtle changes to have a fair comparison. And they're both available on web and app format. So I don't know if one of you click there, but you could see that's kind of a very complete prototype. All the locations, you have descriptions, imagery, links, so you could see the real experience in using these apps. And in the end, I use the user testing, comparing those, and then having the guidelines, as I mentioned earlier, could be applied for historical town centers or World Heritage sites. The evaluation, I did unmonitored evaluation because I got people from Germany, also people from Italy, so it was a lot of people spread around. So in the end, I ended up with 30 participants, including a member from Weimar GmbH. I invited people from Weimar GmbH and Klassische Stiftung, and then one of the Weimar GmbH participated, which I think that's very positive. And then I did this kind of A-B comparison style, and then in the end I ended up with 69 questions in total. Was quite a lot, but I want to be assured that I would cover all the angles. And in the end, you have these final guidelines that some of them is from industry review, some from literature review, and even some from evaluation, as I try also to test other things that was not found on both guidelines, such as, okay, let's try grid format or listed format, let's try different types of icons for maps. So I also include more input from myself to test it as we're doing this. And in the end, of course, some guidelines are common. It's not that, okay, literature review is totally different from what the industry did, but sometimes they have common, let's say, navigation visible all the time, self-explanatory menu. Some guidelines are common in both cases, and some came exclusively from the evaluation. And here just doing an example about it, and then in the end I had 19 from the industry review and 10 from the evaluation, which was kind of very positive in my case. So without further ado, what is the result in this research? So let's talk about it. So just stressing that it's very important to develop a dedicated app and not rely on just touristic apps, because then you can control the narrative. For instance, on Triples or TripAdvisor, you could see that they're just using Wikipedia pages, which is a long text, not curated. So it's kind of not the proper way to address for this kind of information. And then having more tailored information, and also you can think about designing for your tourist profile, let's say age, groups, content, and language. Depends on the tourist attractions you have, the kind of tourist profile, and also offering other features such as tour, dedicated maps, articles, and even offering other services such as guided tours, ticket to museums, etc. So I'm gonna talk about what the findings, and when you have ones that was exclusive from the evaluation, you'll be this red star mark between brackets. So the layout here is more about the structure. It's not about cosmetics. It's about what elements should be in the screen or what they should be paying attention to it. So some of them are very known, it's very established already, let's say, but one is placing content in one screen, minimizing, avoiding scrolling. So you talk about here someone that's arriving in Weimar, download the app just to walk through the city. So sometimes you don't have time to read so much or really scrolling while you're walking on the streets. So try to content in one screen. Sometimes not possible for sure, but then you just make what's more important visible, and then you have other sessions, and consistency between different sections. It seems obvious, this one, but when I was doing the industry analysis, a lot of apps, they use a different layout from different screens. Sometimes the navigation disappears, sometimes you have a background image, so it was very confusing. So maybe doing consistency could be a better options. And orientation is more about providing the title. That's also iOS and Android, they talk about this. It's about to know where you are, and providing a search bar. This one I could not implement it to the prototype technicalities, but let's say you talk about Weimar, you have 13 locations, you have Bauhaus, you have classical Weimar. So maybe if you search, you find, I'm just interested about Goethe house, I don't want to see the rest, and then you type Goethe, and then you find it. So providing a search bar when you have a huge amount of content could be a very plus to have in your screens. And the navigation is about how you go through the sessions inside, how to use your interface. And then here is about the number of taps to achieve information. So you have to minimize that as much as you can until you to 3 taps max. Let's say this prototype you see here, you have the main screen and then you have the location. So you just click in locations, you see it, and then you click in the list, and then you find, let's say in 2 taps, you can find the information. So that's very important, not to click until you find it. So when you minimize, you optimize the way people do it. And also the items in the menu, I found apps, even they have a scroll bar, horizontal scroll bar in the navigation with so much features they all provide. And in this case, maybe just focus on what's important, let's say top 5 and max. And then but yes, I have so much to say about the location. Then you can use this hamburger menu. You can see there in the top corner on the right. And then there you can put more secondary information or other kind of navigations. But just focus on what you want to show in your main navigations. And talk about the main navigations, make it visible is very important. Again, it sounds like, yeah, sure. But a lot of apps, when you go for another screens, they disappear from the menu. And then that was a really problem about usability. So you have to go back, and so it was not proper optimized navigations. And one level navigation menu is about, okay, maybe you just, let's say here in these examples, we have locations. You click there, there's other locations. Of course, you can go through inside the locations, but the navigation is a very easy to access without having more in-depth content. And offer visible submenu navigation. This one was one that I included. Well, I did not find on both guidelines, but I decided to test it, and it was a very positive test. Sometimes you have a submenu, and then you can include here, as you see on the screen, let's say about Bauhaus, about classical Weimar, about World Heritage. So you can navigate there as a support from the main menu without need to change the screens or need to go back to go there. So this was a very positive outcome I found on the evaluations. And of course, self-explanatory menu is about, don't try to be fancy when using words. Sometimes I want to use historical words to create an atmosphere, but people don't understand it. So maybe, okay, it's location, maps, routes, settings, so it's very clear what it is. And then you can do that inside as a content or as a subtitle. But as a menu should be very understood for the audience. And the presence of back button. Sometimes some Android phones, they do have even a physical button to back, but some don't. So when you're designing, maybe it's always best if you place this back button, even if you have a very good main menu navigation. But sometimes you just want to go back one step, and then that's one thing that doesn't hurt to put it. So that's why. Now the design is about, okay, how the cosmetics, how they are visually treated in the interface. So limited use of colors. These are very known guidelines from iOS, from Android, but a lot of apps, not a lot, but some apps that I use for the industry analysis, they use photos as a background, so it's really hard to read it. And so you talk about someone walk on the streets, the sun, you have this hitting your screen, so it's better to have less colors, have more, and then comes to the simple design, more white spaces, and then you create more section highlights on your screen. Sometimes when you have a very polluted, you don't know what's important, what's not. So when you have bigger spaces and more simple use of colors, you can see the highlights easier and recognize where to tap on your navigations. And also using icons as a support for your main menu or even content inside when you have different categories, it helps to reinforce the information. And also making the space between the buttons very clear. That's also one that was based on elderly studies. Sometimes they find very crowded or very close together, so giving space, and then even they can see, okay, that's is a thing that I can click without clicking by mistaking other thing that I want to do. And also here was a surprise in the evaluation that I used 2 maps. One was with these icons that was customized. I create these icons for classical Weimar, another one for Bauhaus, but the people really prefer the standard one from Google Maps or iOS Maps. So that's just this drop, upside down drop. And then because it was easier to understand, they're familiar with it. And then if you want to do it, don't fancy your way. So just use the standards, iconic communications or maps, and then you have a better way for people to use it. And in terms of content, the way that you treat the content itself, one that was very clear from the academic review and also from the testing was showing short text. And here I think that it was a quite elegant solution here. That, okay, of course, you talk about something that has more than 300 years, is a lot of a history to talk about it, but maybe just place one main paragraph of what it is, summarizing what it is, and then you show like this, show more information, and then you have the entire text. Because here you talk about something, again, you talk about open air attractions, people walk on the streets. Sometimes you don't have time to really read it on the screen. You just want to know, okay, what's the city castle? Oh, is this? Okay, I don't want to see it. Oh, that's the Goethe von House. All right, I want to see it. And then you see, you have a glimpse about what it is about, and then you have the decision about going there or not. Another thing that also helps a lot in terms of understanding how the apps have is start information at the start screen. A lot of apps does this, some of them don't. So, but it's quite simple to do it. So you have a pop-up screen, just explain how it is, and even can put close, or even can put like, don't show this screen again. So it's very easy to implement and doesn't hurt, and actually explain better what you're expecting to see and how you can use your app in this case. And then tours is a very important feature that was not so much found in the apps, especially the one that talks about old cities. So Weimar, you have a lot of places to go with, but it's not just, okay, I want to create a tour, but try to create different tours. Because let's say in Weimar, you might find people who are there for just one day. So, okay, maybe I have 3 hours to walk in the city before getting the train back. So then you have a shorter tour for someone who has just the afternoon. But some people also like to spend the weekend, and then maybe you have a tour that goes longer, that can use more than 1 day. And then in this case, I display 4 tours, 3 about classic Weimar, 1 about Bauhaus. And they are available on Google Maps. This was kind of feature that people really like on the evaluation. So, and I think that makes sense for this kind of setting that you have to walk through the city. And here, focus on display decision information is related to the guideline in the use short text somehow. But also when you have imagery, when you have something that's related to the location, try to focus on what's important first and then go further in the content. So always not go so much deep on the right start. And use aesthetics graphics such as photos, such as illustrations that create a better understanding, reinforcing the content and also creating more interesting appeal. And considering the surrounding environment. Sometimes people forget about it. And okay, I want to use videos. Let's say I include a video there on the app, no one play it. And I kind of suspect that's going to happen, but I want to test anyway. But it's like this, you're walking, there's a lot of sounds on the streets, a lot of noises, and then if you rely on video or text, it might not work out. Of course, when you have our audio guide, of course, you'll be just to listen to audio is another thing. Here, not talk about audio guide, talk about an app for walking through the city, find the informations. And this one large screen font was also based on elderly studies. For my surprise, everybody likes this on the evaluation, even younger audience. So, and then was a very positive thing. So sometimes you make a bigger font size, and then it's better to read, you have a better contrast. But if you want to say, okay, maybe you can just making option to change the size of your text, and then it could be a solution that everybody's going to be happy. But implement a way that, okay, you can have a bigger fonts as much as you can in your design. And here was something that I did on the evaluation that was not from the literature, neither from industry base, that was displaying the location as a list format or as a grid format. Some people like the grid format, but the majority in this case went for the list, saying that you can display more information that's connected to the display more details for the allocations preview. Let's say here I see, okay, is 300 meters from me, is open, or is cost this money to enter, is for free or not. And then also can have a preview. And also people like this list location, the fact that you can change for alphabetical order or for distance order. So that was a very positive result from the evaluation. And here is allowing personalization and configuration as much as you can. And here, let's say here you can maybe change the text font size. Maybe let's say, okay, I have the articles as I showed before, okay, show more, show less. And then maybe, okay, I like to see all. And then maybe you can go to your settings like, okay, just show the entire article without me to need to click showing more. Or active GPS notifications about, okay, if you're near some place, maybe your phone is vibrating, maybe it's gonna play a sound and then let you know that you're close for a point of interest. And also distance units, people really like this one for some reason. Kilometers or miles, and then was one that people really like it, for my surprise. And centered pop-up. So when you click, let's say you're using a map, you have information, you click, sometimes you have the option to show in the bottom or you show centralizing the screen. And the majority went for these centered pop-ups. Let's say that makes more distinguish about the content in general and makes more obvious that you have information that just pop up on your screens. And you have some technicalities. That's one about this was not implemented in the app, but from the huge confirmation from the academic review, I included here as, okay, you don't forget to do this. In this case, that's prevent information loss. Some apps, when you go further and you go back, especially when after you do a search, they delete it, and so you have to go on to a common place. Also provide action feedbacks, very important. Let's say, okay, upload it, so you can see a loading bar, or everything actions that takes time. You have some progression bar that if you give, okay, that's what's going on. You have a sound, you have a vibration, you have something when you're acting, you're doing some kind of clickable things on side your screens. And also clickable buttons and tactile feedback sounds. This also was another one from elderly studies. So if you have a button that you click, so maybe doing a sound like or vibrating, so you know that, okay, that's a button that I just clicked, so you have this feedback. And also provide location-based notification, as I mentioned on this the settings. So if you possible to do it, so when you are closing, because you talk about a city center where you're walking through, and sometimes you might deviate from the tour line. So when you close, receive notifications. And also when you have a map, even you can do this visual clues about what you visited already, or in your list or something. Okay, okay, this one's already see. I can see that's, I don't know, whiter or something different color, and then you have a visual clue about what you already visit. And in terms of media, the use of photos and galleries was very positive, especially galleries. So, and here could be very useful for the decision for you to go for the location. Let's say you have the Goethe Wohnhaus, that's a museum, and then, okay, should I pay to enter or not? And then maybe you see some pictures, you see, okay, he has a nice Italian plate collection there, or very interesting to see the table where he collect visitors for parties or whatever. And then you can see a little bit, have a sneak view about inside, and then maybe your decision to enter or not. But when you offer galleries, more photos, was very positive from the evaluation. And map with GPS, a lot of apps, they just provide a static map, which for me, I find very confusing when I have to walk in the cities with the printed paper maps. I'm very bad on orientation, just as example. So for me, I rely a lot on GPS, and seems from the evaluation, a lot of people relies on that as well. So GPS map makes sense. And in terms of heritage related content, is always displaying the World Heritage logo. So when I did evaluation, just 37% of people knew this logo before. So the majority did know, but after the test, I did a question about, do you recognize this icon? Yes. And how did you recognize it? And 57%, 53%, I don't remember the exact number, said, okay, I remember because I saw in your app. So it's very important to use the logo, but not relying on the logo as a tourist attraction, as a market strategy, because a lot of people just go to Weimar because they know that's the place from Goethe and Schiller, and sometimes they are not aware that's a World Heritage place, officially from UNESCO. So it's very good to use the logo. You are entitled to use it if you are a World Heritage place, but of course, don't rely that on marketing, but use the logo. That would be very important. And also provide a part about it. Say, was a lot of effort to make this a World Heritage place, so you should use that as explain it why it's important, why this legacy is a heritage place from UNESCO. And also curated content. As again, a lot of apps, especially generic ones, they rely on Wikipedia, and here you actually can curate the content, especially about the World Heritage places. So I think that's one of the main reasons to treat the content with responsibility. And in Weimar you have it. You have the Klassik Stiftung, you have the Weimar GmbH, even the Bauhaus website, they have a lot of good information. So you have people already work on this, you just have to put it in an app. And it is not a recommendation, but of course it's something that's very clear to say. It's that I always do for the most popular OS. In Germany, for instance, Android is the number one. A lot of from the market, a lot of apps was just for Android. Some of them was just for iOS. So it makes sense to always make for both, especially when you talk about tourists. For instance, here in the United Kingdom, iOS is the majority one. So it's a different market. And let's say if you want to have British tourists, probably they will be using iPhone. So just example. So always do for both. Always, that's our recommendation. So final considerations. So of course you can be argued that the guidelines that are proposed in this research could be used also for any touristic apps. And that's kind of true. The only difference here is about the treatment about World Heritage related content in this case. But the profile could consider it as the same. Let's say you have point of interest, you have to walk through the city, you have to have a nice design, navigation, layout, content recommendation. So this works for more scenarios that not just related to World Heritage. And of course, as any research, you can always think about, okay, what could be done different, or you have a restraints about time, restraints about budget. So of course, I ideally could be about creating a real app and testing again with different groups, with elderly, with teenagers, and also try to find other ways to interact with heritage content itself, how you can also contribute to that. Well, there's always space for more investigations, but I believe from this research is about having these industry review elements and also personal inputs, testing the evaluations. But of course you can mention, okay, systematic literature review is not new, but what makes different here is about the elements that was chosen to be used in this kind of results. So you talk about World Heritage mobile studies in general, industry recommendations, and also studies from travel, city apps, mobile studies on dealing with different age groups such as teenagers and elderly, always aiming to create a guidelines that could be more universal, could be making more a wider group of users happier to use your app. So the results also help to reinforce that the need to use academic search when you're developing such kind of an app. As you could see on the evaluation, that majority of the guidelines came actually from academic studies and not from what the people are doing in the market right now. So that's why it's very important to actually take a look on what people are researching about it to influence your design. So again, the ideal scenario will be implementing this one and testing again, see how it work out. But said that, I believe the found guidelines in the research can benefit developers, users to help to promote our World Heritage as a tourist attractions. So, and was proved to be successful for the Weimar profile. And I believe if you do this guidelines for any similar cities, you have a great chance to have a great app and people really using it and getting a better experience. So about the references, here is the reference that I use in this presentation. So I'm not gonna show so much. So I just like to say thank you to all. I want to say thank you for Florian to stepping in this project, getting a running project. I know it's not an easy task. Also, I want to thank Martin for external reviewer. And also thanks Eva, Michael, Sven, and Brigitte to be part of this committee. And also Anya, who's not here today, but Anya helped me a lot in this process, a lot. And also I would like to be in the minutes of this presentation, a special thanks for Jens Geelhaar. It's a very emotional moment for me, and it's strange that I'm here without him. But I'm just saying I wouldn't be here if it was not for him. So I'm very thankful for him, for everything he did. So and that was my presentation. Thank you very much.